Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe.
100 years ago, you didn't know peace of mind. You struggled sober through the vast expanse of time. Then many factors came and you were redesigned. And now you're clean and bright and everything is fine.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and if you've joined me for a podcast where we talk about the songs that have been inspired by plastic cutlery that you get in fast food restaurants, you've come to the wrong place. I think you're looking for musical spork. However, here today on Musical Talk, we're going to be dedicating the entire episode to one particular show. It was a show that really surprised me, and it's lingered in the memory in the weeks and months since the Edinburgh Festival Fringe closed. I like shows like that, shows where sometimes you have to engage in a slightly different way because the show's a bit odd, curious, individual, unique, whatever word you want to say, and then you go home after you've seen it thinking, I really enjoyed that show, but there's more to it than meets the eye, and then you slowly unravel it, work it out, and put it back together again in your head. This is one of those shows. It was intriguing and curious when I saw it. I loved it immediately, but it was difficult to quite work out why. It took me a while to do so afterwards, and those are the shows I like the best, the ones that you take home with you once the curtain has closed, whether it be a figurative curtain or otherwise. Not many curtains in Edinburgh, and the ones there are usually black and on the back wall, but there we are. Now, what is the name of this show, I hear you say? Well, I'm going to tell you straight away. It's called the Quentin Dentin Show, and I got to speak to Henry Carpenter, the writer and the main performer in the piece, about this remarkable, exciting, interesting and lingering show. And I think you'll find that the interview that we had will not only give you an insight into the show itself, but will also tell you rather a lot about Henry as a creative personality. For creative he is, and he's a man who takes a lot of who he is, who raids his own psychology, I think, in order to inform his work. So the Quentin Dentin Show, whilst figurative and illusory in many ways, also tells you a lot about the individual and the individuals behind the show, because every show is a creative and collaborative effort. But Henry Carpenter is the man we're going to be talking to today, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. But by way of detour to take us into that interview, let's just talk about an email I received this last week. It's actually from an old friend of this programme, Michael Gordon Shapiro. You may remember he's a great composer from America, who's rather versatile, I must say, and to whom I spoke about mini-musicals a few years ago. He wrote to me recently saying how much he was enjoying the Musical Talk coverage of this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. So, Michael, thank you so much for writing to me. It's always lovely to hear from you. But he made one very good observation. It's that it would be lovely if we could hear more songs or extracts from scores when these interviews go out. Now, I must tell you, I do try, usually, to ask people if they have songs, but you'd be surprised the number of people who don't actually have decent recordings of the scores from their shows. And so sometimes it's just not possible to provide songs or extracts of songs from shows, which is a great pity. But that, I'm pleased to say, is not true of today, because Henry is a highly generous man and has some excellent recordings of some of the songs from the score. You'll be hearing 3 today. And the first one will be along in, well, almost immediately, because we're going to play it now, and then we'll hear that interview with Henry Carpenter. And, as you'll hear him say in this song, everything is fine.
Years ago, you got no peace of mind. You'd struggle sober through the vast expanse of time. Then benefactors came and you were redesigned. And now you're clean and bright and everything is fine. Doesn't come for free, you have to make some sacrifices. You have to turn the cameras on and feed the databases. But soon you learn to ward away your existential crisis with lots of friends and lovely films and beautiful devices.
Your glass, drink it down, and everything is fine.
Where can I find the beautiful? The billboards show the proof. Their faces are inscrutable, their pictures tell the truth. Their cheekbones are unstoppable, their haircuts are divine. No need to be unsociable when everything is fine.
The drum, crack the whip.
Musical talk.
Hi Thoz, I'm Henry Carpenter and I'm with the Quentin Dentin show. I wrote book music and lyrics for it, and I'm also playing the titular Quentin Dentin, and that is my involvement with the show.
In fact, you're not just in the Quentin Dentin show, in some ways you are the Quentin Dentin show.
Yes.
Although obviously it's a collaborative effort with other people and actors and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, I love the Quentin Dentin show, and it is a show unlike any other show I've seen, and because of that I'm going to ask you briefly to describe the concept, because I think it's going to be easier for you to do so because you've lived with it.
Certainly. The Quentin Dentin show is a story about two very ordinary people who find their lives and minds invaded by a sort of phantasmagorical, fantastical, singing, quote-unquote therapist who's basically a sort of space rock star, David Bowie, kind of Jonathan Miller sort of mishmash. He's got these two Dr. Zeusian helpers, and they come into this ordinary young couple's life and torture them for about an hour in increasingly ridiculous ways, increasingly sort of, initially very harmless and funny, and becoming quite sadistic. Until
almost without them realising.
Yeah, it's kind of up to the audience to decide when things have got too serious, but they do take a stand eventually. But the show is kind of inspired by therapy and therapeutic techniques and psychotherapy. This incredibly glamorous rock star kind of angel character comes in with his kind of glib gnomic statements and his sort of semi-profound or possibly meaningless verbiage, and begins to tell this ordinary couple how they can become happy and how to live their life. And at first it seems like he might have a point. They go along with him and they can't quite get it, and so he's forced to ramp up his techniques to the next level. And the show sort of takes the audience along with the two characters, because the audience is sort of also being treated simultaneously with the very ordinary 20-something couple. The show takes the audience and the couple on a kind of whistle-stop tour of psychotherapy as a surrealistic, psychedelic series of musical set pieces until something snaps, and I won't spoil that.
Yes, a crescendo is reached, I
A
think.
crescendo is most certainly reached, yeah.
Now, let's talk about how it came to be, but I just want to sort of set the tone, actually. I mean, if I asked you for how would you describe the tone in one or two words, how would you describe it?
I would describe the tone as, well, in one word, psychedelic, I think I would say. Because the show is so unusual, we've been using a lot of movie elevator pitches where you say, X meets Y. So, you could say with this, you could say Dr. Faustus meets Rocky Horror, which is what we have on our flyer.
I was going to go one better. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say Faust meets Rocky Horror in the Garden of Eden.
Exactly,
how I would
yeah.
do it, yes.
Or you could say The Mighty Boosh meets David Bowie. That's another one that we say sometimes.
However, those equations, shall we say, always undersell, I think, because they make everything sound derivative. And of course, I don't think this is in any way derivative. I think this feels fully formed from an unusual mind, and the unusual mind belonging to you, Henry.
Yes.
So tell me, how did it come to be?
The Quentin Dentin show came about kind of by accident when some friends of mine were trying to devise a piece, devising a piece in a sort of devised theatre, kind of young people in a theatre company way. And it wasn't really working, and they brought me in to write some songs.
Because you do write.
Because I'm a songwriter.
Yeah.
With at that point I'd written one musical, but my main sort of
musical
output was with my rock band Jimmy Getaway, who of course feature in the Quentin Dentin show fairly heavily. And I came into this project, which was at the time just about a young 20-something couple, to write some songs. Yeah, really.
Right,
so it's
a flatter start.
Yes, basically the way that the story of the Quentin Dentin show works reflects very much the way that it happened, in that there was this play being devised, although they were only kind of a couple of weeks in, about a young couple. And I came in and I said, well, this is kind of boring to me, at least. And it was all about kind of unhappiness and in relationships. And I said, well, look, what if there was someone who was incredibly well balanced, who just really pissed them off and sort of but tried to give them lots of helpful advice, and with that and the sort of idea that I would play this character, and also the fact that I wanted to write songs for it, because that's what I do, the Quentin Dentin show really kind of grew up organically from that. And at a certain point, Hannah Elsey, the director, decided that we should move away from a collaborative devising process and that I should write the whole show.
An authorship role.
Yeah, exactly. I really embraced that because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I find it. I was finding it I think no one was finding it harder than the people who were meant to be collaborating with me, to be honest. But we were all finding it a bit hard to work in that way. So I was very happy to take on the writing.
And obviously,
role.
you've already drawn out the fact that this is where art parallels life, isn't it? Because you actually got some collaborators who have got something, but isn't yet forming into anything. It's not coagulating, shall we say. And then this enigmatic stranger called Henry Carpenter comes in, zizzes it all up and makes it work. About a play where two people meet an enigmatic stranger who comes in with at least attempting to zizz it all up for them in their daily. I love that. Beautiful parallel. When was this, would you say? When did this really sort of approximately?
We began sort of talking about the idea of doing a show about 13 months ago. The first scratch of the Quentin Dentin show in a very kind of inchoate form with 3 songs, no live band. It was just me on the piano doing backing tracks. Still had the wings though and the gold suit. They've survived from that very first scratch. That was always an integral piece. Was in September of 2014, and since at the Rag Factory in London. And since then, we kind of kept on adding to it. We performed it at National Theatre Young Studios, at Theatro Technis, and then at Rich Mix, the Shoreditch venue in January, which was the first time we added the live band.
Ah, right. So every incremental stage has sort of taken it further.
Yes.
And you've been learning from your audience as well.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of how the show has evolved, and part of why I kind of took control of it in the end was because that was the stuff that was most successful, with audiences.
Well, in a sense, you're a dramaturg author, because you do both, and it seems to me that you're able to trim the excess. Because there didn't appear to be any sort of self-indulgent moments as far as I was concerned, so I was rather delighted by it. So.
Well, I just hate time wasting on stage, and as I say, I have this background in rock music, and rock music. As a rock music writer and a performer, because I'm the frontman for this band, what that is all about from a theatrical perspective is. If you lose their attention for a second, you're done, because they're going to get a drink. As a rock writer and performer, you have to have people like constantly either
Yes.
or like, hey, we're going to dance now. You know, it's you cannot afford to waste anyone's time for a second, because the success of a rock performance is based on how euphorically they're dancing every moment throughout. And really, I just like treat theatre in the same way.
It's engagement then, isn't it, really?
It's all about engagement, and it's also about respecting the fact that I don't know, I don't think pain is interesting. I think
Not intrinsically, no.
not intrinsically, and it's it's about respecting and acknowledging the fact that the audience wants to be given sugar, and if you can get some medicine in the sugar, then that's fine, but it still has the taste of sugar.
I believe Mary Poppins may have something to say on this.
I
yes.
believe she may, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me, because it's interesting that the idea is created in this early collaborative way of making something out of what's there. Then you take ownership of it, or are given ownership of it. But there's still a big way to go between that and a performing version of Quentin Dentin. The song parts are easy for you in the sense that you're already a songwriter, and you have written a musical beforehand, a year or so ago, you say.
But that was with the book adapted from Shakespeare. I've never written a play before.
That's right, it was Measure for Measure.
Measure for Measure, that's right, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, in this sense, this was a step out for you. And coming up with something as unique as the Quentin Dentin show, how difficult was it to grapple with the idea to get something you thought would be theatrically workable?
As you say, this is my first time writing a quote-unquote play, and it breaks a lot of rules. It's not what you would call a formally correct play. But as I've sort of said, for me, there was an awful lot of grappling with making it interesting and making it fun and making it work theatrically. And God knows, there's been about 20 drafts of this script before we got it as right as it is now, which is still not by any means.
But I'm really pleased to hear you say that. And forgive me, that shows craft. That shows that you're there to improve. It's not, my work is finished.
No, Christ, no.
Yeah.
Well, I have no idea what I'm doing, just generally. So
Well, in which case, your veneer is excellent.
Thank you. But no, it's a tissue of lies, really. But the Quentin Dentin show, I guess the reason that it works, or the way that I made it work, and this comes back to what I just said about just prioritizing entertaining people, is I don't certainly at this point, in the first play I've ever written, I've not been thinking in terms of character arcs and creating people and creating kind of emotional engagement. I've been thinking more in terms of gimmicks and funny things to put on stage.
Hooks.
And hooks, exactly.
Hooks,
And the way that I wrote this was as a series of hooks and a series of gimmicks and things to jump from one point to another. And then once you find that rhythm and that like high, low, high, we can go lower here.
The profile,
maybe we can get something a little bit sincere in here that's kind of might resonate with someone. But really it's the way that this show has been written has really been about entertainment first and making sure that there's not a dull moment, and then filling in the sort of what I would call the kind of serious playwright bits almost as an afterthought.
I think maybe you undersell yourself, however, because actually the construction of a more traditional piece would also have nexus points, particularly in a musical, actually. You work out where your emotional crises are and where you would, if you were just writing a traditional Broadway musical, say, you'd work out where your characters were ups and their downs were, and you'd stick a song there, or something interesting theatrically. And that's exactly what you've done here. You've just done it in a heightened sense. But actually the methodology is not a million miles away.
Methodology is not a million miles away, but musically the form is very, very weird. I mean, you say, for example, working out the nexus points in a classical Hollywood Broadway musical and putting songs there. The way that musicals work is that characters sing, that the songs are points of heightened emotion for characters. Yes. In the Quentin show, because two of the three main characters aren't from a musical, they're just from real life, and only one of the characters is from a musical, and he's kind of more from a kind of rock show, really. Yes. None of the songs come at emotional high points. They come at sort of when they come at points where Quentin feels the need to lay on his propaganda as fiercely as possible. The songs don't describe high points of emotion because Quentin is not really an emotional character. He just sort of gets angry.
Yes, but he is he's
a powerful character.
Yes, he's a powerful character, and to a degree, a control freak. I'm not trying to draw any psychological profiles here. You understand, but So actually, quite often the songs are at moments when he asserts himself.
Yes.
Or he has taken control.
Absolutely.
Which are nexus points within the context of this plot, because, and I hope you won't mind me saying this, there is a journey for the characters.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone would go into this piece saying that it's a heart-rent emotional journey for the characters involved particularly. It's not Dostoevsky or anything like that. That's not in any way to underplay it, but actually it's trying to do something else. And it's, as you say, it's entertainment first. It's a comedy. I think we absolutely ought to say this.
This is a comedy.
This is a hoot.
Yeah. Thank you.
And because it's a hoot, the first expectation is that every moment will be entertaining, and if it's not entertaining, it's you're laughing as well as being entertained. So those are the levels at which those are the peaks it's trying to achieve, and it achieves those peaks very successfully. There is emotion in it, but the emotion is not incidental, but it's not the first point.
In terms of the sort of emotion of the show, like for me, a big part of the serious stuff in it was I wanted to talk about therapy and about the way that psychotherapy works, because I sort of in a kind of very, very, very ordinary teenage way went through a few years of therapy, and I find it intensely interesting the way that perhaps the kind of happiness that one is guided towards in therapy is not so much a kind of, is not always a sort of subjectively worked out kind of ethical solution for you. It's kind of a
couldn't agree more.
Societal norm thing, and I wanted to talk about that, and I also wanted to briefly talk, because it's been done so many times before, but I briefly wanted to talk about the pain of your first relationship going wrong, and the pain of first love, and of realizing that first love is not enduring love necessarily. No. But as I say, for me, those aren't really funny subjects, and
not overtly, no.
And the way that I dealt with making them funny is having this character. Well, it is having them literally battle against something that was very funny and very overpowering, like Quentin, the whole kind of universe of Quentin and his helpers, who are called the Friends, and all of his songs, his rock band, who are on stage throughout, in matching white boiler suits and dark glasses, and his his light shows and his bizarre props and his massively visualized stupid metaphors for nothing, and the whole point of that is to try to appear that this sort of character who's trying to drown out all of the serious stuff, and he very nearly succeeds.
He does, yes. You were talking about gnomic comments and statements, the metaphors which don't really help at all, but sound fabulous. There's a lovely song about lemons.
That's right,
and that is a perfect example of that.
That is a perfect example. It means nothing. Yes, it means absolutely nothing. So stop paying penance, just be glad you're alive. Your own apprehensions are stopping you thrive. Throw down your weapons and turn into a knife. When life gives you lemons, get a new life. That's verse 1.
And I particularly love the lemons things, isn't it? Because there's that tremendously twee kind of poster truism of when life gives you lemons, make lemon pie or something like that. And that always turns my stomach anyway. So to be able to hear someone also to take that, the one that seems quite resonant because we've all seen the wretched thing, and turn it on its head and show how vacuous it is.
Well, then we start juggling with lemons.
Yes, well, you do. Yeah, well, it's also the physical.
Yeah.
No, you see, I love that, and that's a very good example of the kind of thing you're talking about. Yeah, no, there's some. I've got to ask you this. There is a certain spot of anger in you, perhaps, which is driving the satire in this.
Yeah.
I don't want to probe it too much, but
not at all. No,
you would recognise.
Absolutely. Well, like a lot of the stuff that I do is driven by anger, and a certain tiny kernel of it. I mean, my band Jimmy Getaway is it's got quite a lot of punk in it, although it's very kind of smoothed out, glamorous punk. But
actually, it fell easily upon. I appreciate we were getting the version of the show, but the music fell easily upon my ear, and I'm not the first person to get into bed with rock, I must say. So I think you've managed to square that circle.
I mean, I'm absolutely trying to make sort of very friendly, accessible music, but it is punk in sort of inspiration, a lot of it. But no, there is a kernel of I guess anger in the Quentin show, which is which is really about.
Well, it's righteous anger, which is the best kind.
Well, it's sort of righteous, but the Quentin show is kind of. It's kind of about the fact that there are no answers to the question that it poses. How should we be happy? And it spends all this time, the show, with this kind of cartoonishly fun, dazzling character who's telling you all these different ways how you can be happy, and telling you that you have to be happy, and that then he will make you happy by force if necessary. And then he is, well, I won't spoil it, but really the character of Keith in the show is is basically me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The journey that Keith goes on in the show, which is, he starts off with his girlfriend and it's not going very well, and then he goes on this kind of fantastical journey of learning, and then it turns out he's kind of learnt nothing. And then his girlfriend leaves him, and then he's left at the end with what exactly? And that's kind of the emotional core of the show for me, is this kind of the disappointment and
void.
Void. Yeah, that's a good word for it. Just the disappointment and the kind of dejection of learning that there is no easy answer, and that's why you have this kind of, in the show, you have this very aimless, kind of fairly naturalistically portrayed couple, sort of set against
they're
this.
Likeable but average.
Yeah. Very average, and they're set against this character who really does appear to have an answer for everything, and everything he says is something you could see on a poster with a kitten hanging on a branch. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Or like a rock and roll lyric, which is often very much the same thing. And yeah, if there is anger or sadness in the show, it's really about the fact that these I guess we could call them therapies, or these statements, these messages don't work and aren't true, and there is really nothing you can particularly take away from anything in terms of kind of profound questions, and there are no answers, basically, and you have to figure out things like how to be happy entirely for yourself
in your own context.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. So there's nothing off the peg.
Yeah, and the show is kind of dealing with that disappointment and the way that we might really want to believe that there is an answer, and an answer to whatever you want to call it, the meaning of life, how to be happy, and
an answer to be served up by somebody else. Rather
yeah,
than, yes.
And that's the very comforting thing about psychotherapy. If anyone listening has been through that, is it's the illusion that there is an answer, and that there is a methodology, a sort of a 3-ring binder, as it were, about how to live your life and how to be happy and how to be fulfilled. And the show kind of, in a way, takes you through that journey of going through therapy and sort of being initially enamored with this sort of it's all so easy, it's all so simple, and then you do kind of have to, well, metaphorically kill your therapist at the end, because that there is no, and accept the fact that actually you get out and everything goes back to how it was, and maybe you've learned something, but you probably haven't learned anything that you can apply.
Well, and sometimes worse. I mean, I speak only from my own personal experience. I used to have a very, very good and dear friend, but he was essentially an unhappy man. He got himself a psychotherapist, and after a very long time, and he was a private psychotherapist, so after an awful lot of money, this gentleman, as far as I can gather, identified that the problem was that there was no spontaneity or life in him because he planned everything, so he should live in the moment. So he started living completely in the moment, and as a result of it, lost all his friends, or rather, he made no effort to retain any of his friends.
Right.
And also, we were identified as being part of the problem, I suspect. We were part of a life that was holding him in with its plans and its schedules and things like that. And so the whole raft of us never saw him again.
What's happened to him now?
I have no idea. Yes, I hope he's not floating down a river, but there we are. I wish him well, but I fear that many of us have been jettisoned in line with someone else's pat answers. So exactly, I do understand a little of what you're saying, I think. However, let's talk about the characters.
Absolutely.
Because Keith, who's the chap in the average couple, and Nat, who's the woman in the average couple, are, if not every man and every woman, they are at least an exemplar of a kind of life.
Yeah.
Quentin, however, I would say is not. Quentin is enigmatic, strange, confusing, unique. Looks very unique. And if you don't, may I describe you in the show?
Absolutely, please do.
You are wearing a white two-piece suit, gold shoes, if I may say. They go a long way, and you do have platinum blonde hair. You're also, if you don't mind me saying, you are Quentin, and you have quite a striking physicality. You're a tall man, and you fill a stage with your persona
Thank
as well,
you.
which is obviously what this character has to do too. I have to ask you, how do you find filling Quentin as boots, his golden boots? I know you've written him, and therefore you're able to tailor him a little to those areas of yourself that you think you might be able to find. But he is a demanding character beyond the text,
Yeah.
I think. He's a man who could live alive, and you could put him in the street context, you could put him in another play. He would, there's something about him which... He's so madly unique. I know that's a ridiculous sentence, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean, yeah.
That he's difficult to pin down. So how do you fill his boots? How do you pin him down?
Well,
Because you are both his father and him.
yeah. The character of Quentin is derived sort of from two main areas. It's derived from the sort of classic, supercilious, patronising doctors of British comedy, as embodied by people like Jonathan Miller in Beyond the Fringe, and also a huge inspiration for me for Quentin was Graham Garden from The Goodies.
You have just said the most magical words in my life. Thank you. I'd like to marry your clone.
I'm a huge fan of The Goodies, but
and so am I.
But do you know what I mean then?
I do.
Graham from The Goodies is
and
a big...
he's the intellectual heart of that, as well as being wackily over the top.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a huge thing for Quentin was Graham Garden, who was also kind of the main writer on The Goodies as well. So he gave himself all the best stuff.
Well,
all the ones where he goes mad and sort of becomes really monomaniacal.
If there is a format to The Goodies, there's three of them, and they represent different strands of British life.
That's
in a way,
right.
Actually,
Yeah.
You've got Bill Oddie, who's the
working class.
Yes, if you like. You've got Tim Brooke Taylor, who's the middle class, and you've got Graham, who represents, I suppose, the intelligentsia in some sense.
Yeah.
And the theory is that every week one of them goes mad with some kind of delusion, carries it off to the absolutely nth degree, and then the other two have to sort of resolve the problem. That's a thumbnail sketch of that formula. I'm so delighted you love The Goodies, because it's my all-time favourite comedy programme, so thank you. But yes, Graham Garden is one of our most intelligent comics as well.
Yeah.
I mean, even on the radio today. So thank you. Right, I've interrupted you, but thank you for letting me.
No, absolutely. Well, yeah, no. So Graham Garden was a huge thing for Quentin, just in terms of that kind of I've always got the right answer. And Graham Garden is even when you watch him on The Goodies, and he's magnetic. Like, he's someone who really fills the stage and kind of like grabs your attention. But then on the other side of it, you've got huge inspiration for me for Quentin, and just for all of my other work too, was David Bowie. Is kind of my probably a greatest inspiration for me out of anything, and a large part of that is in his performance and the way that he creates these incredibly striking images and looks, and he knows better than almost anyone else, I think, how to use stillness and poise to almost intimidate an audience into loving him. And a huge part of Quentin is derived from Bowie, image-wise. The white suit, the white hair, that's all serious Moonlight, early 80s Bowie, and that's a very conscious reference. But also in terms of his movement and his kind of demeanour on stage, very much sort of Thin White Duke, sort of 1976 kind of era Bowie. And the third big influence for the character of Quentin, but also this is mainly for the friends and the look of the band, was the American rock group Devo, who are not very fashionable at the moment, but Devo for me are one of the kind of greatest pop chemists of theatre and intense, heady, ideological, subversive stuff and music that broke the mainstream. They're absolutely incredible, and one of their greatest achievements, I think, was kind of breaking out in their early years, playing all of this music, which was very rocky and very accessible to the ear, but was all kind of about being mechanical and being sort of sapped of emotion, and doing it all wearing boiler suits, so they'd just come from a kind of chemical processing plant. And at a time when rock music was all about sort of the overblown pomposity of the rock star as a kind of messiah figure, completely obliterating their own identities. and that is something that I find hugely. I'm just Devo. Kind of, I think that they're beyond geniuses and criminally underrated by people in musical theatre, I should add, who I think would really get a lot from them. And there's a great deal of Devo DNA in the Quentin Dentin show.
But what an interesting fusion, if you don't mind me saying. The marriage there it's quite interesting. I mean, just picking up strands, the Jonathan Miller superciliousness and Graham Garden kind of controlled by less, almost. Less is more, very much with those characters and the characters they portray. Plus the heightened performance art of, and I use the word advisedly, but of David Bowie, plus the removal of self to create a bigger issue.
Yes,
and
that's exactly it. Yeah,
you marry those three things together, you've got.
Well, you've got Quentin.
You have indeed, absolutely. But what an interesting dynamic. Gosh, that's very interesting. That is really quite remarkable, I think. To be honest, I also love that character. How easy is it for you to be that person?
It's extremely easy for me to be Quentin. I'm naturally quite supercilious and quite remote when I'm not trying to engage, and
thoughtful, perhaps.
Yeah, or somewhere else. As I said to you earlier before we began recording, I can't improvise Quentin because all the words that come out of Quentin's mouth are very, very carefully designed statements of propaganda of one sort or another. But it's very easy for me to inhabit the mannerisms and the sort of the mood and the temperature of Quentin.
So the character rather than the dialogue is easily yours.
The character is very easily mine, and you know, you said very kindly that I fill the stage with it, and you know, Quentin, that the reason that I'm able to do that with this character is because I have this background as a rock performer, where you know you go up on stage. In theatre, you're really privileged with the audience's attention. You know, if you're a rock band, you know, you go up on stage in a place where, you know, you really have to earn people's attention. You have to take people's attention from them. And, you know, you do that by jumping up and down and being magnetic. And Quentin really is about applying a lot of those performance techniques that I've had to learn as a rock performer with my band Jimmy Getaway. To the stage where they seem so much bigger because, you know, in theatres there's this expectation that you will be paid attention to, but I'm not used to that as a performer. I'm used to having to really earn people's attention.
Does that? Well, let's ask that then. Bearing in mind this, you know, there is the etiquette of theatre, even here at the Fringe, because it is just theatre writ large.
Oh, the Fringe is incredibly polite. Everyone's very nice to each other, audience-wise, here.
But do you find, therefore, that actually a large, powerful, not overwhelming, but whelming, shall we say, character like Quentin, where if you were doing him in the rock context, you'd put all that oomph and power that you get in. By doing that on stage, does that in any way overwhelm an audience?
It certainly has done in the past. There are things that I have to be careful not to do with Quentin. I have to be very careful not to get angry. I have to be very careful to. A lot of the changes that this show has gone through has been finding exactly the right dynamic of relationship between Quentin and the audience, because the audience has to be aligned with Quentin so that they can laugh at Keith and Nat, and so that they can like Quentin and want Quentin to keep torturing Keith and Nat. However, the audience also has to be aligned with Keith and Nat so that they realise that they are also Quentin's patients, and that he is treating them and patronising and sort of being slightly sadistic to them as well.
This is the difference between like and respect. Now, normally one goes with the other, but you're asking the audience, and you're allowing that to happen through an interesting dichotomy. It seems to me that people need to respect Quentin because he is a figure of authority without so much liking him, and they need to like Keith and Nat, but they have no respect for him.
Yes.
And that's a really interesting break of what would normally be the expect. You know, because a character in most musicals or most plays actually would demand both.
Well, it's difficult, and it's not something that we've always achieved in this show's history. And as I say, the script is still very much evolving to better fill out to better just make sure that these relationships establish themselves. But you know, a lot of the things that are kind of currently in Quentin, like I don't know if you picked up, I'm sure you did, it was very obvious, that the whole kind of Jeremy Kyle
Yes. Elements
and kind of framework. That was really put in very close to coming to the Fringe because I felt like the audience needed that bit more context for what their relationship was supposed to be.
But the title of the show helps with that as well.
The title of the show does help with that.
It is called The Quentin Dentin Show. So, there is that element, which is artifice, and because we all know that there's nothing more artificial than television.
No.
And indeed that particular kind of programme.
Apart from musical theatre.
How dare you, sir! I wave my jazz hands at you. Well, you're also right, of course. Although it's interesting to fuse the two together if you can and get kaleidoscopes of artifice.
Well, I mean, have you seen Shock Treatment?
This is the sequel to Rocky Horror.
The sequel to Rocky Horror,
which was on in London about
It was on at the
2
King's
months
Head
ago.
very recently, yeah. I urge you to watch the film. That was a huge inspiration for Quentin as well. That's a musical that takes place in a television studio. I won't say any more about it, but if you or anyone listening hasn't seen Shock Treatment, watch it, and it very much informs the tone of the Quentin Dentin show, I'll tell you that.
Now, let's talk about influences in another direction. I'm going to ask you a bit about your own musical history, if I may.
Absolutely.
So, forgive me, before we were recording, you were telling me that your first contact with music and education with music was, in fact, during your childhood.
That's right. I was a professional chorister when I was a boy. I sang with various London choirs, like Temple Church Choir, St Margaret's Westminster, and I went on tour. I sang with the Philharmonia Orchestra as a soloist once.
Did you know? Right?
Yeah, I was really quite good when I was a boy, and then something dreadful happened. I lost my voice, and I kind of lost interest in it really for a while, and was actually, when I was 16, 17, I was thinking I don't want to have anything to do with singing in particular, but I did have this huge back catalogue in my head of basically the classical choral repertoire, and then about a year later, didn't take very long really, my mum bought me a keyboard, and I started just bashing out rock songs that I'd been listening to in chord shapes very simply, and kind of realising that because I had this kind of set of skills from a completely different context, I had this understanding of a new kind of music that I was only starting to really fall in love with, that I could just apply, and suddenly realising that I could understand how rock songs were put together, and I could maybe even write my own. And that's really my musical background. I'm self-taught from that point on, but using this phenomenal set of skills that I was lucky enough to be tutored in while I was young and absorbent.
Exactly the right age, yes,
Yeah.
quite. But forgive me, I tell you what comes out of that absolutely, and there's touches of stereotypes here, but of course, when one thinks of choral music, one really does think of religious choral music,
absolutely.
and all the stuff that goes with religion, particularly in this country, which is an Anglican country.
Yeah.
So you have the church aspects of it, and faith and holiness, and the purity, and all those. We're using all those sort of positive upwards, whether they deserve it or not, but that's how it's perceived. Mix that with rock, which of course isn't in any way speech marks satanic, but has been described as sort of bad music and evil music, and is something more percussive, and what it is earthy.
Yeah.
It's a much more natural. One is finesse and one is earthy, one is holy, one is darker, light dark. That's what we're getting here. This is a beautiful dichotomy. And it seems to me that actually that you've rather splendidly brought that into Quentin Dentin, because you had the rock music, smoothed though it is, it's coarse, and yet at the same time Quentin he embodies both good and bad in some senses. He has his angelic quality about him, whether that's real or not, that's for the audience I think to interpret. He also has this cruel side to him, the darker side to him. I'm really interested to know, you've got these sort of bubbling things from your own youth and upbringing in you, which have come out in this piece. Do you recognise the religious elements in your...
Yes, the religious elements of Quentin are incredibly... I just think it's such a powerful set of stuff to play with. Like
the archetypes and iconography. Yes.
Exactly. It's not so much about religion, the Quentin show. In fact, it's not really at all about religion, except in as much as it's about the idea that possibly in a very secular society we've created for ourselves a new religion based around happiness and
But he offers a
hedonism.
salvation, though, doesn't
But he does
It's
offer a salvation,
Whether it's a
and-
good salvation is another matter, because everyone talks about, forgive me if we're just talking about speech marks, real religion, people talk about paradise. No one ever defines what that is, because I have a suspicion my paradise will be different to yours,
Yes.
etc., etc. So, it's all very simplistic, obviously, but I am very interested in that. Yeah, you speak about that, so I've interrupted you horribly, but I do
not
like the
at all.
fact he appears, and he dresses in, you know, when anyone sees a painting of an angel, they are wearing white.
Yes,
Not
of
necessarily in golden boots, but you get the idea.
They are. Quentin is absolutely styled as angelic.
Yes.
He receives transmissions from above and talks to a holy beam of white light from the sky at one point.
And I would like to say this, you have platinum blonde hair, that people out who are
Yes.
listening can't see that, but you are a very striking figure at the moment. It's also a fantastic head of hair,
Thank you.
of which I'm hugely jealous for a whole raft of different reasons. But, you know, forgive me, you once again, you cut this figure, you just walk into a room and eyes are on you.
Thank you. Well, that's certainly the idea. But yeah, no, the Quentin Dentin show uses all of this religious iconography to kind of set out a to sort of suggest a world of angels and demons and sort of salvation and redemption and damnation that isn't really necessarily anything to do with religion, but
But we use them in day-to-day life for our
But we-
day-to-day
but we
yeah,
do use
we
them,
talk about,
and-
you know,
yeah.
how I've had a hellish day. You know, you have the face of an angel.
Yeah.
Whatever that, you know, even in simple things like that, we use it all the time.
I
so it means so much more than the words.
I just think it's an incredibly powerful set of images and ideas, and you can sort of refer to them and give something. I mean, I don't know, possibly this isn't true for people who didn't grow up with, you know, in a religious background, but for me, you know, just using ideas of angels and salvation and God and the devil and things like that just gives things that extra oomph, because you know you've got this kind of you're playing on just ingrained pathways in people's minds, you know.
It's shorthand, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
for
shorthand.
a set of cultural ideas.
Exactly.
Whether one subscribes to the tenets of a religion, those tenets are part of the infrastructure of the
Yeah.
society in which we live,
Exactly.
and therefore in all our lives, regardless of not whether we consider ourselves religious. Yes.
Well, it's really about that and about you know, like in our society, you know, we live in a very secular society. Perhaps the God of Anglican is not the God of most people, but you know, I feel that the God of most people, and this is certainly what the Quentin Dentin show is saying, that the God of most people in our society today is sort of to do with kind of a sort of self-actualization and like physical hedonistic kind of fulfillment and quality of life, whatever that means.
Mr. Cowell, I want to do this because I know I can be a star. Yes.
Yeah. And Quentin is really, literally an apostle, an angel from that God, the God that we have at the moment. And the Quentin show, if you were going to take that element of it seriously and look into it, which is by no means, I should say, something that I insist the audience do in the show, but it's there
Just
for
a bit
people
of
who want
keyhole
it.
surgery if you want to look
Yeah,
in with
a
a bit of
bit,
light, isn't
bit
it? Yes.
keyhole surgery. The Quentin show sort of maybe kind of gently, satirically wonders, like, you know, if every society does create its own God, what would the God that we've created in this society be like, and what would he want from people, and what sort of Christ would he send down?
And I love that. You know, forgive me, I love the extra resonances. I mean, you can go in completely miss all that or not be interested in that at all, because it works in its own right. I mean, we were talking before we recorded, but not only has it got all those religious elements and you can take them and draw from them as much as you like, but it is also, in its own way, in speech marks, a science fiction
Yeah, absolutely,
play.
yeah.
You know, and actually science fiction could be seen as the flip side to religious
Oh, totally, yeah. Well, particularly in a
science and religion
technologically driven
yeah.
society, you know, surely God is like a satellite at this point, you know.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And it also, you know, forgive me, there's always been a huge dynamic in society, well, ever since Darwin, and before really, but Galileo, I suppose you go back much further, but you know, between religion and received information, received knowledge, and discovered knowledge. I mean, that at one level, that's a rift that runs through all modern societies, I
Yeah.
suspect. And you play on that as well. So you've got this lovely side. Can I just say, one of the things I love the most, and it's such a throwaway, is that there's some lovely sound effects. I mean,
Yes.
you are in yourself sort of out of a radio, but which is lovely as well because it's not from the television. You know, funny enough, I thought that's just such an interesting twist. But the thing I love the most, or one of the throwaways I love the most, is a bit that you react to sound effects. So you are almost this kind of. You're probably too young to remember Max Headroom, but there's this kind of...
Oh, no, I know what you mean, yeah.
But you do things with your hand, so you will describe a circle in the air with your hand.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a sound effect, which is in my ear, making the sound I would imagine
right.
of describing a circle.
All
It's like
played
you're-
live by Nicky Boyardi, the guitarist, or all the other musicians.
There's a real symbiosis between you as the performer and they as the musicians there, actually. But there's this lovely sense as though you're sort of communing with an invisible console. I think is the only way I can describe it. But you do that so well.
Thank
It's
you.
just a little sort of throwaway almost, but there's more going on. There's an invisible set of controls and instructions which we can't see as mere mortals.
That's right, yeah.
I love all that.
No,
Yeah, so,
there's,
you know,
there's,
it's got
there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff like that. Like I mean, as I said earlier, I love gimmicks, but yes, it is. It's you get to see Quentin's control, I guess, and a large part of Quentin's the way that Quentin is so much larger than life on stage, and the way that the audience feels his kind of magnified presence and his magnified control is through the fact that he will just hit buttons in thin air and stuff will react.
Yes.
And in that, and that was always a kind of key thing that I really wanted to do, because for me, music is a inherently manipulative form of address. Songs are persuasive, and Quentin is a propagandist, and I wanted to express Quentin's power and his sort of fascistic ideology through a rock band, and the rock band is really.
That's such a lovely sentence, by the way, as well.
Thank you.
Carry on.
The rock band is really is Quentin's third arm.
Yes.
I didn't want the band to be like in a pit, like with a conductor. Sort of one is supposed to accept that music is issuing from the air, as you do in normal musicals. The music is just part of the diegesis, and that's fine. You go in expecting to accept that. In the Quentin show, Keith and Nat are not from a musical, and they can't see the rock band that is living inside their wall. The audience can, and the audience knows that is that they are Quentin's technicians. Quentin and the band and Quentin's helpers, the friends, are all working for the same end. They're all working for the same whoever upstairs, and they're all working together like kind of technicians on a submarine to spin levers and pipes and press buttons, and Quentin's just the business end of this kind of production line of stuff that is surrounding these two oblivious characters.
Really, yeah.
Exactly, he's the interface, yeah.
Can I say, you said something in the throwaway right at the beginning, which was absolutely lovely about the friends. So these two they're also in boiler suits, two women who are, they're inert at the beginning. They're on the stage, and then they come up and sort of come to life, and you sort of think, are these androids, are these sort of mannequins come to life? You used the word Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, thing one and thing two.
Yes, exactly. And there is an element of the cat in the hat, is there not? And you are the cat without the hat in this case.
Yeah.
How much is that an overt reference? And the band also fall into this category of the cat in a hat. For people, I can't imagine anyone doesn't know, but can just sort of click his fingers, and his little minion helpers will come along and conjure out of thin air, whatever the rhyming scheme requires.
Yes,
a fox in a box, or a fish on a dish. You get the idea. In fact, you probably get the idea better than most, but. But it's also the perfect description for the relationship with these, particularly the two helpers. It's lovely that they are there when they're required.
They're just happy little elves, really, the friends, But then there's also this, they are wonderful dancers. Ella Donaldson and Caldonia Walton, both trained dancers, kind of came in, and part of what makes the show successful, I think, is the fact that everything is very, very tightly choreographed, and the movement is extremely stylized, and everyone is putting their foot in places intentionally, which is kind of not something you always see at this level of theatre, and certainly for me that's what makes the Quentin show pop. That and the band is the stylisation of movement.
There's a lovely scene, isn't there, where you and the helpers are doing this sort of, I would have to call it a triangular dance.
Oh yeah, the numbers dance.
Yes, and Nat and Keith are trying to get in it, but they don't quite get it right. So, but it's beautiful choreography because you are almost in sort of mechanical formulation doing your dance, and they are almost getting it but not getting it right, and yet no one quite collides, and it doesn't quite fall flat on its face. But it has both the perfection of a clock and the failure of
people.
It's not so much God in the machine as people in the machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. The symbolism is beautiful, but actually, just as a simple piece of this is so pleasing on the eye. It's a wonderful piece of choreography.
Thank you.
I love these little moments. It's full of this kind of quirky, wonderful,
Thank you very much.
meaningful stuff.
Well, that dance was not easy to do. We had to plot out everyone's movement on graph paper in the end.
It looks to me like you have a choreographer used as a spirograph. It
Yeah,
really is
exactly,
that kind of thing. But it pays off in spades. That particular scene,
Thank you.
There's lots of lovely bits.
That's one of my favourite bits.
It's a great bit of choreography. That, yes. So, all in all, Quentin Dentin is a real treat. It's a comedy, but it's got layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And I think as an audience member, you can go in and you can take it absolutely at face value and enjoy it, or you can dissect it and enjoy it again, and you can take it further and you can find cultural references. And this conversation alone has been fantastic. It is a wonderful piece. So, not everyone is sensible enough to come up to Edinburgh to see it. Is there a website? Are there contacts? Do you have plans for the future? What may or may not happen? And how can people contact you?
Well, anyone who's interested in me and my work can check out. Your first port of call would be Jimmy Getaway, which is the name of my band. Who also
and that's Jimmy with a Y, isn't it?
That's Jimmy, Getaway, one word, Getaway. And you can find us just by typing that into Google. We've got a number of studio recorded stuff on soundcloud.com/Jimmy Getaway and a bunch of YouTube videos. We're very active in London. We play all over the place.
So gigs are possible?
Yeah, gigs are very possible. You can come find us on Facebook and check out our gigs, which are very theatrical. And if you've enjoyed the Quentin Dentin show, I think you might enjoy our gigs. And the Quentin Dentin show itself is also findable online. We're hoping to bring it to London. Very much hoping that we can get it on in London somehow, or even possibly expand it into a 2-act, because I was saying to Foss before we started recording, there's a lot I want to do with it. There's a lot of new bits of therapy torture that I think can would be very funny.
And can I just also say here, we were talking about some elements of it being modular. It's almost episodic in some senses. So
it's absolutely episodic.
You could expand it. You can concertina it up and down as you need to fit your time elements and whatever's required, without it feeling overblown or underplayed.
Yeah.
It's actually very clever.
It's a sketch format.
Good.
Well, I mean, we were talking about the Goodies earlier. Like it's kind of inspired by the Goodies in terms of the way that the structure works, because they can just go off on flights of fancy and then come back to this fairly loose but very malleable and stretchy story, and that's kind of how Quentin works. Like, with only 3 characters who have kind of one arc each, you kind of, you can. It's like Stretch Armstrong. You know what I mean? Like you can really take it anywhere.
70s references are fantastic.
Thank you.
Give me some Grange Hill and a sausage on a fork, and we'll talk again later.
Yeah.
But so there's a hope that it will come down. So does it have a dedicated website? Or?
It does. Slick Rat, the name of the production company, which is essentially my director and producer Hannah Elsey and myself, has a website, and you can find it there. You can keep up with information with the Quentin Dentin Show on Facebook,
of course,
and
where else
and
would
Twitter.
He be? Yes.
Where else would he be exactly? And yes, we really, really hope that this will not be the last that you hear of us.
So do I. Well, Henry, thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you.
And I hope that Quentin Dentin does go on to greater and greater things. I also hope that Henry Carpenter goes on to greater and greater things, because I'd be very interested to see what the next project might be.
Thank you. Well, I do have a lot of... I do have a bunch of things that I'm going to return to in London in September and begin writing, but I'm not really at liberty to talk about them at this point.
Get those hairs running.
Yeah.
And I don't mean your lovely platinum hairs. Do you see what I did there?
Yeah, I do. Yes, it's good.
It was weak, wasn't it? So anyway, Henry, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
All power to your elbow.
Thank you very much.
Numbers, numbers, numbers tell me everything I ever need to know. Numbers can be high and numbers can be low.
Other numbers
numbers up,
Are the numbers down?
are the numbers down,
Are the numbers up?
are the numbers up,
Are the numbers down?
are the numbers down? What's your favorite number? Is it 5?
Is it 5?
What's your favorite thing about being alive? Is it poetry or piety or aiding your society? If you don't like ambiguity, can't tell ugliness from beauty, take my hand and learn exactly where you stand. Superheated air expands, and that's what causes thunder. Health is 16 hours awake and 8 per hours of slumber. When I started singing, you were 60 seconds younger, and I'll continue singing for 100 seconds longer. Seven, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. How much have I still to prove? Woo! Numbers, they dictate my every move. Music, it's only numbers in a groove. Are the numbers up? Are the numbers down? 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 Numbers! Yeah.
Musical Talk. Another song from the Quentin Dentin Show, and I gave that show 4 stars and called it unique, startling and very funny, like nothing I've ever seen. And I was talking to Henry Carpenter, and I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation. As I say, it's a marvellous example of the symbiosis between personality and production. He really informed the creative process in that production, and I think it is, in some ways, the flower of who he is, so it reflects back on him. I hope we've learned a lot about both the show, the Quentin Dentin Show, and Henry Carpenter, the man behind it. And I do hope that the 2 songs you've heard so far and that conversation have made you want to hear more about the Quentin Dentin Show, and also about Henry and his work, and also his band. A quick sidestep here, I should say that Henry was really, in a way, doing 2 shows a night in Edinburgh, because not only was the Quentin Dentin Show on late in the evening most nights, you could actually see Henry and his band Jimmy Getaway performing a set of about 45 minutes on one of the stages along the Royal Mile. And he was dressed in his full Quentin Dentin fig, and a striking gentleman he looked too, but the performances were excellent, and I must say I find his particular style of music extremely easy on the ears, and that's not damning with faint praise, that means I enjoyed it a great deal. So, how can you find out more about him, the show, and his music? Well, there are plenty of ways. Here's some. Go to these websites: slickrat.com/Quentin Dentin, and that's all one word, and that will tell you more about the show and keep you up to date with news for the future. But you can also hear from Henry's group. They're called Jimmy Getaway, and if you go to jimmygetaway, all one word, .com, you can find out a lot more about them, and you can hear some of their music on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Jimmy Getaway. The show, The Quentin Dentin Show, was produced by a company called Slick Rat. You can find out more about them too, and indeed hear more songs from the Quentin Dentin Show if you go to soundcloud.com/Slick Rat. And of course Jimmy Getaway is available on Facebook and on Twitter, so you've got really no excuse not to keep up with what's going on. And while we're on the subject of websites, you may remember that I mentioned Michael Gordon Shapiro at the beginning of the programme. He's got a website too. It's www.mikemusic.com. Also well worth going along to. Well, remember, ladies and gentlemen, Musical Talk is on every week, pretty much. And I intend to be back again next week with the very last episode of our Edinburgh Fringe Reviews. It's our pick of the Fringe programme, so do stick around to hear something of that. But for the time being, it's probably time for me to say farewell, or goodbye, or auf Wiedersehen, or bonsoir, or any other possibility. But you get the drift, which is goodbye. And we're going to play you out tonight with one more song from the fantastic Quentin Dentin show. Goodbye.
Wake up in the morning, step into the sunshine, look all around you, people surround you, the universe beckons, but it's people you trust, you desire their attention, and you need to be loved. So you get up on a soapbox and start shilling your wares, your unique opinions, but nobody cares. They take it as an insult, and an insult it is. They prefer you on default, no one likes to be quizzed.
If you think you're a freak, you feel different and strange, stop nursing your ego and you'll find you're the same. You're not long on this planet, why cause yourself strife? I can free you from panic, this is the meaning of life.
Making people, making people like you, making people, making people like you. Winning admiration, it's simple and quick. Use intimidation, hit them with a stick, or tell them that you love them. They want it to be true. If you close your eyes, you might half believe it too. It doesn't matter how you make friends. What matters is the number. That's how you make trends. They don't know me from Adam, but they sing out my hymn. With mass comes momentum. Friends are good for one thing.
If you think you're a freak, you feel different and strange, stop nursing your ego and you'll find you're the same. You're not long on this planet, why cause yourself strife? I can free you from panic, this is the meaning of life.
Making people, making people like you, making more people, making people like you.
Everybody wants the same thing, everybody gets the same thing, everybody is the same thing.
This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015, except for the songs where the copyright remains with the creators. In this case, Henry Carpenter and Jimmy Getaway. And my thanks to Henry for allowing me to play those songs in this episode.
The Quentin Dentin Show is a story about two very ordinary, mediocre young people in their 20s. And just as the audience begins to think that they might have seen this all before and that they might get up and leave, their ordinary, mediocre 20-something play is invaded through the fourth wall by a character from a much more interesting play. So I like to think of it from a sort of, invaded almost sort of by David Bowie from like one of his, from like the Serious Moonlight tour or something like that.
I know people who pay good money for that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to start with this again.